Hey everyone, welcome back to Better Workdays. I'm your host, Andy Morrison, and on this week's episode, we're going to switch it up a little bit. I told you I was going to start bringing in guests, business leaders from Northeastern Connecticut. This is the first episode where I'm doing so. And the first guest is Jim Zahansky. Jim is the Principal Managing Partner and Chief Strategist at WHZ Strategic Wealth Advisors. He leads their strategy, their client experience initiatives, their client acquisition and retention efforts, and their team leadership and development. Jim transitioned to WHZ in 2014. That was after he spent 17 years as a senior executive in the pharmaceutical industry, where he developed and implemented strategies and initiatives for major U.S. pharmaceutical brands. We talked about that in the interview. Jim is active in both the business community and the community at large here in Northeastern Connecticut, which is another reason I really respect him. I love business owners who are not only running a great kick-ass business that's doing really well, but they're lending their expertise to really good community organizations as well. In Jim's case, he's the immediate past president for the Northeastern Connecticut Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors. He's the immediate past chair for the Hale YMCA Board of Advisors. He's a director for the Day Kimball Healthcare Board, and he's a corporator for Jewett City Savings Bank. Jim joined Better Workdays to come on here and talk about his leadership philosophy. I had mentioned in the past, part of the reason I wanted to have guests on is I've got clients that I'll talk to. We'll talk shop about leadership development, employee development, learning in the workplace. And I'll often think to myself, man, this conversation would be good on a podcast. Jim is one of those people. So that's exactly what we did. We came in with just a very brief discussion of what we wanted to talk about. No script, no, not even really a formal outline. And I thought it was a great conversation with a lot to learn. Jim is someone you can learn a lot from. He's got a lot to offer, so I'm very happy to bring some of his insight and expertise to you, the Better Workdays audience, on this week's episode. All right, well, Jim, welcome to Better Workdays. I appreciate you being here. You're our first guest in the Real Custom Training Center.
I'm honored. Thanks for having me here, Andy.
Yeah,
it's
of course.
Great place to be and great place to train.
Yeah, and we've got good neighbors.
Yeah, we're currently your neighbor for a temporary basis as our home office in Pomfret is being redone, but absolutely good neighbors right across the walk.
Yeah, we do. We do our best. We try here. We want to make Putnam attractive. So Jim's here today because we at Real Custom Training on the Better Workdays podcast, our first season was largely me hosting, talking about different topics, presenting things we cover in our leadership development workshops. And for season 2, I wanted to mix it up I wanted to bring in more guests, but not just guests from the talent development field, although we will be getting some folks on, other speakers, facilitators, but I also wanted to have a focus with the guests on Northeastern Connecticut, and in particular, business leaders in Northeastern Connecticut that are using some of the very same tools and concepts and frameworks that we talk about on Better Workdays, that we train people on at Real Custom Training. I wanted to bring people in who are using those to help show the audience that it's not just me touting these things because my business is in the business of touting these things. Of course, I'm going to say they're helpful. I wanted to bring in some local leaders who are putting these tools to good use and having a lot of success with them so that the audience can get another perspective on the things that we talk about on Better Workdays. So Jim, that's how the invitation came to be. And I appreciate you being the first. I don't know if you're aware too, WHZ Strategic Wealth Advisors was also you're the first private group training client for Real Custom Training.
Yeah, no, and we've worked together a couple times on building custom training for our next generation leaders, which has been awesome. And for us, we had a chance to work together and actually build out the types of training we'd want to do for our leaders, some baseline training. And then the second time with you, we focused more on coaching and situational leadership models and, how to coach up your next generation leaders so they're ready to coach and build growth mindset into our teammates.
Yeah, and coaching was really, Jim and I talked about a few different topics. Jim will be a recurring guest. I don't know if he knows that yet, but we'd like him to be. But one of the, there's a whole lot of stuff I could talk to you about, but we landed on coaching as kind of the focus for this first go around.
Yeah.
So I was curious, Jim, Can you tell us a little bit about your history? Obviously, you're in strategic wealth advising now.
Yep.
You were in the pharmaceutical industry before that. Tell us a little bit about your professional development.
Sure.
And the role coaching played for you early on.
Yeah, so first off, coaching, no matter what you're doing, from playing athletics to working to being an athlete in any sense, or wanting to be a better worker, is critical to success, right? And for me, I had the good fortune of working in the pharmaceutical industry for 17 years. Started on the sales side and then went into brand marketing for Sanofi. I was in their home office in New Jersey, and then left Sanofi and joined Sanovian in various brand leadership roles. I ran U.S. brands that people may know, like Lunesta and Brovana and Allegra. And
I'm on some of those things now, Jim.
Yeah. So and ended up being the head of respiratory for the U.S. That's a division of medicines, and learned a great deal. And I think I had a ton of mentors. I feel fortunate in my life to have been also invested in by my company. Right? They invested by giving me tools like coaching models and how to apply situational leadership models to coach people up, and how to make teammates better every day. And when a company invests in you like that, I reap the reward. And now I'm bringing that to the company that I co-own with Lawrence Hale, my business partner, and we own WHZ Strategic Wealth Advisors. And we're in the midst of growing our business, investing in our next generation leaders, being sure that they have the right tools and the right models necessary to lead our people. But ultimately, that delivers a better result for our clients.
Yeah, and can you elaborate on that a little bit? The business impact of these types of initiatives, because I know sometimes I think there can be a resistance to professional development and coaching and training. Sometimes what I hear from folks is it can all sound a little kumbaya, especially people that pride themselves on kind of being hard asses,
yeah,
and, really tough business people. Or if they didn't get that type of mentorship themselves, sometimes I think they fall into the trap of, well, no one coached me up. Why do I need to coach this next generation? But one thing I know we've talked about before is that, there's very tangible benefits for your business and your overall success if you adopt these practices.
Yeah. Yeah, I always follow the analogy that, the best skilled team wins the most games, right? That's true of athletics. It's true of business in most cases. Skills are not necessarily known at every level. They have to be taught. They have to be nurtured. And for any given role, whether it's, manufacturing, wealth management, sales, marketing, finance, teaching, training, there are certain skills that make people good, right? And you have to have a certain skill set. But not everyone the day you hire them is that good. You're hiring them probably for the things you can't train. Maybe like good character. Maybe they have an exemplary record of growth and investment in themselves, and they work hard. Those are all the things you can't train. And those are the things that you want to look for when you hire somebody. But then you also see if they're coachable. Are they trainable? Do they listen? Are they willing and responding to the way you're teaching them? If so, it really shows that they're willing to grow. And that's a key ingredient to being a good coach, is hiring people with all those intangibles I just explained, but also have a growth mindset, that believe they can grow. If they have a fixed mindset, they don't really believe they can grow. They might not have the confidence in doing so. So you want to sort of look at those things when you hire folks. And then I think our philosophy at our company is that we hire, the folks with all the things that you can't train. We develop in them, we invest in them, and give them the right skill sets to deliver for our clients every day. And that isn't an instant process.
Yeah, it takes a lot of patience, I think.
Patience, and to your point, I think you mentioned that there's a perception perhaps that coaching and training is soft. I would also say it's smart, because if you hire the right people, you want to give them a pathway, a career path for success, retain them. Every time you lose an employee, It costs you money. You have to retrain someone else. You have to recruit them. And, you know, it really gets back to the culture you're trying to build. So if you hire the right people, you teach them, you train them, you develop them for the next role. That's kind of, I always say, hire a level up, which some people don't want to do. You want to hire, you know, you might be threatened by the person you're going to hire.
What do you mean by that? Hire a level up?
So if you're a manager level hire someone who you think can make it above you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, hire the person who has the potential to make it above you. Director level, whatever your company says is above a manager, hire that potential. And in doing so, you're enabling your organization to grow, but then you're hiring people who want to be pushed and have that growth mindset to be taught to, you know, go further for the client, go further for the best end result. And you're reducing turnover. Now, I'm not saying we don't make mistakes when we hire people, but if you look and have a constant criteria for what people, you know, are exhibiting as a growth mindset. I'll give you an example. You have two candidates you're looking at for an entry-level position, and both of them on LinkedIn are 10-year veterans. One has stayed in the same role. The other has taken 3 different roles and has taken tests, gotten aptitude, gotten certification on LinkedIn or LinkedIn Learning. You have a demonstrated, in one scenario, a demonstrated growth mindset, and in the other, a more fixed. Mm-hmm. And depending on the sort of role which you're hiring for, you consider those things, right? One is demonstrated over time they were willing to grow. And likely, we're not sure if they've been coached, but if they had, they probably would accept it and maybe even grow further. And that's the type of candidate, you know, we always look for. And that's why we say our mentality on hiring, which we also call the most important decision we make, it's hire a level up.
Yeah, and I can tell you that I've often, some people I work with, different workshop participants, oftentimes if they're describing an employee that's particularly challenging, they weren't in a position to hire that individual. Mm-hmm. You know, the way they were structured was the decision got made above their heads, outside of their hands. And so a company like yours is a great example for them of, you know, hiring is one of the most, if not the most important decision you're going to make.
Yeah.
So, you know, when I have supervisors and managers in our workshops who tell me they're removed from that process, my heart goes out to them. And I try to encourage them to talk to your company. Can you get any say in, you know, who's going to be added to your team? Because you're, you know, if you're adding the wrong people to someone's team and then holding that manager accountable for the team's performance, I know I've been in that position before, and it's not a great place to start. And in terms of growth mindset, I like listening to you and your team talk. You all got me hip to the phrase kind of, what are you working on? You know, because you're all highly skilled, highly driven people, successful firm. So I think sometimes when you look at successful people, it's easy to think they got it all figured out. And then once you get around them, and I noticed this with your team, everybody from you to everybody in the organization at all levels, everybody's very cognizant of what am I working on? Yeah. You know, for some folks, it's I'm working on my body language when I'm presenting to a client. For other folks, it might be I'm working on emotional regulation so I can be better at feedback. And that really, that helped teach me that, you know, I think that could be a shortcut to, if you want to feel out whether someone has a growth mindset, just ask them, what are you working on?
That's right.
And if they can't answer it, that's very telling that they're not sure what aspects of themselves they need to be developing or are developing. It's
a great interview question.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, if you have a candidate, you know, you're asking, tell me what have you done that's really awesome? And then you say, what are you working on to be better? It is a long pause in most cases, but I find that people don't want to give up that they're weak. We would rather hire people that are working on something because everyone is, to your point.
Yeah, and it's indicative of self-awareness.
Yeah.
Which we know is a key part of emotional intelligence and leadership. You got to have that self-awareness.
Well, totally self-awareness. And I mean, you know, to be what we would call a servant leader, a leader who is there to serve the growth of the people that are in the company or their followers, right? Whether they're direct reports or not. I mean, the idea of servant leadership, or that concept, is that the leader works for the people of that organization, so they get better, the company gets better. But the word is, to be a really good servant leader would be empathetic. Are you empathetic and listening? Those are two key criteria to be a good servant leader. Are you listening to what someone wants to do? And then there becomes, and we talked about this in our last session with our team that you helped lead, this difference in, so being a servant leader, being empathetic, and then what's the difference between coaching somebody up, with a coaching model, right? They just did a presentation, or they created some sort of client, financial model or something. In our coaching model says, well, what do you think? How did it go? Okay, depending on what they do, what could you have done better? How do we do it? That's the coaching model. It's those 3 steps. And the servant leader, though, has to listen. And oftentimes, what we taught at the last session was that's the coaching model. Now, if someone responds back and says, I just don't think I can get there, right? Or there's excuses of what went bad, and we can't get there. So at some point, that has to become a counseling discussion, right? It has to be managed. Not everybody, to your point, is going to blissfully say, yes, I can do this better, and go do it, right? And so that's a key component, I think, for those people that say coaching is soft. I would argue that at some point they may be right, that maybe not everyone can be coached, and then it becomes counseling.
Yes, I agree. I've noticed that with coaching and a lot of the stuff we teach at Real Custom Training, sometimes the resistance is because they think to themselves, well, what if I tried it with this individual? And then they think, no, it wouldn't work there. Therefore, the whole model's flawed.
Yeah.
But I think those can be kind of the exceptions that might prove the rule. And it's important to know coaching's not going to be the most effective tool in every situation for every employee. But like you said, then you can transition into counseling.
Yeah.
Where you are holding people accountable, setting clear expectations, and still doing your best to help them reach those. But yeah, it's not a kumbaya, it's okay that the report was late. It's not necessarily that, but it's, the report was late. What can we do differently? How can I help you meet these deadlines in the future?
Yeah, and if they aren't met, then you have to really deal with it. And there has to be consequences, right, to bad performance. Otherwise, in organizations that are high-performance cultures like ours, which is what you want, right? You want high-performing people who are producing great work for your clients and great output. That's a high-performance culture. Sometimes we fall down. You have to support that. And then if it's a pattern, then you deal with it, right? And that's the difference between coaching and counseling. But you always start with coaching. How do you make people better? And you give them tools. I know in our company, we've been working with you for the last few years, building leadership modules. We've taught people how to have good counseling sessions, how to have good one-on-one meetings, how to have difficult conversations, and now we've taught them a coaching model. We've taught them situational leadership, and we've taught them how to counsel. And those are some really good tools for upcoming next generational servant leaders. And every company should think about having the right tools that their leaders can use that builds a high-performing culture.
How important is it at WHZ that everybody on your leadership team is well-versed in these tools and concepts and using them, as opposed to what I find, and I'm trying to build solutions for this, is sometimes we'll have companies where, frontline managers, middle managers, we've got them in the workshop. So they're picking up all these great tools. But then when they get back to work, maybe their manager isn't aware of what, the situational leadership model is,
Sure.
or isn't coaching our customer the way our customer is learning to coach their employees. So what are the benefits of making sure everybody on the leadership team is cohesive in that sense?
Yeah, in my opinion, it has to, in order for the team to be a team, We have to talk the same language, use the same tools, using them and learning to use them the same way. Critical to the success of the organization, critical to the culture. If you're seeking a high-performing culture, having a common set of, in our company, we call them competencies. These are skills. If you're a leader, you have a certain set of competencies in which, in certain situations like, collaboration and interpersonal skills are a few examples. And then there's a range in which at your level you should be performing on that, right? These are standards, and they're great evaluation tools for how people are and leaders are responding. We also have them for individual contributors. So if you're an individual contributor, not a leader, you're contributing in your function like financial planning or client relationships in our world, you have your own set of what are the skills you need to work on or you should have at the level best in your role. And by the way, what are the ones for the next level up? Mm-hmm. So how do you strive for those? Those, to your question, having the tools, objective tools at every level, and if everyone uses those, it is the key driver of high-performing culture. And I learned this, and I played this podcast for my team last year, I think at one of your sessions. I learned this in the pharmaceutical industry. I started at a company called Merrill Dow. They were out of Kansas City. They were owned by Ewing Kauffman. He was affectionately known as Mr. K. I didn't know him. Some of my mentors did. And there was a podcast on leadership. There was someone who was asking a few of my mentors what this meant. And in essence, in a very short snippet, having competencies and rating people on skills is the very essence of being people first. And it doesn't mean you're soft. It means that you care about people, you care about growing them, and at some point, if they don't want to respond to that, then you have to do something about it. But until then, you make them better.
Yeah, it's ironic that these skills and concepts that can be perceived as soft, I think, make it easier to do the hardest things in business.
Yeah.
Letting someone go is going to be easier if you've got that clear criteria where everybody can look at it together and say, yeah, it's just not there,
right.
As opposed to one manager going about it their own way, another manager having their own philosophy, and everybody kind of figuring it out as they go from their individual perspective. That organizational approach to everything can make it so much smoother. And that podcast you mentioned, we can put that link in the description for this one because the name's escaping me too.
Yeah,
but it was a great episode.
I'll have to get you. I forget the name of the actual episode, but I listened to it and found my mentors on it, which was really enticing to me. But it speaks to this idea. A lot of the concepts we're using now relate to something that goes back to Mr. K, right? When you think of a coaching model and you think of situational leadership, these are all things you learn as a first-line leader in the pharmaceutical industry. And so they've been incredibly helpful in our business.
Yeah, and I remember one of my takeaways from that episode was that they were putting people first, investing heavily in people, but asking a lot of them, which again goes against that notion of, it's soft.
Yeah.
It's like, well, no, you've got very high expectations for people, and you're investing in them to help them reach those very high expectations, but there's nothing really soft about that.
No, if you think about it, this is a concept that can be used beyond business. You think of the best skilled sports teams, they practice every day. They practice almost year round now. And each of them has a certain role in which they're trying to get better at. The composition of that team may change in the off season, trades may happen. In the end, every day, people are trying to believe in a system in which they're going to get better in their role so that they can produce more wins and get. And it's also true in the business world. And that's why your question on organizational philosophy on leadership, can the top leaders have a different philosophy than the middle leaders, than the line leaders? No. They may have different tools, but in the end, they should all be rowing the boat the same way. I know it sounds cliche, but that's true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I hope this is exactly why I wanted to get your perspective, Jim, because, as I talk to other companies we work with, there's some where now we've been working with them a couple years. We've had a lot of middle managers come through, and now I'm approaching them to say, hey, look, can we get the next level of leaders on the same page? Can we get everybody in the organization on the same page. And oftentimes it's it's I'm drawing on the work I've done with you and the WHZ team to be able to say to them, look, here's how they're doing it here. We helped out in some aspects of that, and we'd like to be able to help you too.
Yeah. I mean, and again, no matter what industry you're in, if the ultimate goal of any organization that's in business is to produce value for their customers or clients, and they're delivering that value through people, how do you invest in those people? Whether they're line at a manufacturing company or whether they're, an executive in that same company, ultimately they all reap a better reward if the culture is strong, people are happy, and they're well-skilled. Mm-hmm. That's a proven fact as it relates to, improving your profit. And the investment in the people is usually made by the people at the top. They have to make that decision or not, and that's in tools. So very clearly an opportunity to produce more wins, as we call them, which is giving your people the right tools, giving them the right stretch goals, helping them get there, and your clients usually or your service is better for it.
Yeah, and you see the benefit through the retention, because ironically, the more you develop someone, the more attractive you're going to make them, or the more capable they might be of taking an opportunity elsewhere. So WHZ, I know, has different approaches for, the investing in them is one way. Totally. Laying out career pathways so that even your individual contributors from day one can come in and have an idea of, if I make a commitment here and stick around, there's all sorts of different pathways I could go down.
Yeah, right. Because, and particularly, for Generation Z and millennials, they want to know, hey, what am I getting myself into here in this company, right? What's my career path? In fact, interestingly, more recent hires being in that Generation Z, sort of just out of college, they want to know what's the career path. It's a great question, right? And if companies don't have one, how do you get there?
Think of the debt they just came out of college with. Of course, they're concerned with what's the longevity. I just made this huge investment. Where I work next is a continuation of that.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. The career pathing piece is a component of obviously a growth-oriented organization. How do I hire the right people, train them to be successful, give them growth opportunities? And by the way, it doesn't also mean that not everyone is going to A, advance, and B, at the same pace, right? But everyone should have the opportunity. Mm-hmm. And that's where the leader's job comes in, the evaluator, and you having objective tools like competency grids. Yes. And having the ability to decipher what skill sets are needed to lead certain parts of your company. If you have those tools like a competency grid, leadership core competencies, what are they in your company? And if you have those, you can evaluate talent. And if someone is displaying the anchors that line up under the competency. So if the competency is, competency one for us is strong interpersonal, the ability to build strong interpersonal relationships. That's basically, can they talk to people? If you're an individual contributor, the basic necessity is, yes, you can open your mouth and have a good conversation and listen to people. All the way up to the partner level, and in between there, you've got manager and director and VP. And at the partner level, you're sought after for those interpersonal skills in your community, by your clients. And so you can see the difference, right, in that range of career pathing. But we have an objective layout of how can we measure your growth objectively so that we know whether or not Andy's moving faster than Bob, right, up the career path. And then how do we help Bob catch up? But maybe he can't. Maybe he just isn't learning at the same pace. Mm-hmm. That's okay. Doesn't mean Bob's bad. It just means they might be learning differently. And that's sort of how your leadership team can assess the next generation leaders. Because, and we find this a lot with our business owner clients, who's the succession plan? How can your clients have continuity, or your service have continuity beyond you? That's really the job of any leader.
Yeah, if Jim Zahansky and Lawrence Hale aren't there tomorrow for some reason,
that's right.
How confident would your clients be? I would think in your case, you got, obviously it'd be quite the challenge, but you have developed your next generation.
We have a who's next, right? We have a succession plan. It certainly wouldn't be exactly the same as it is today, but like that's what you want for your clients, right? You want to be able, and for your services if you're not in the client business, is how can your clients or customers have continuity to what you're giving them beyond you? And how are the people that are on your team getting ready for the sort of who's next mentality?
Yeah, and it really, I think sometimes there's another misconception that people in leadership positions must be egocentric. But in a case like that, you're putting the organization above your own ego. It's acknowledging, that we're all working towards something bigger than ourselves as individuals. I want that something to succeed beyond my direct connection to it. Yeah. And the only way to do that is to look at the next generation and help them come up and help them develop skills too. So it's a very, it really, I think it does require putting ego aside to lead that sort of way. Whereas I'm sure everybody has seen other leaders who it's kind of the ship's going down with them in a way. They're not worried about the life of the organization beyond their role in it.
Sadly, right? I mean, and they sort of fall into that because maybe it can't operate without them. And some people like that sort of savior mentality. It's okay. I mean, some people operate better that way. In the end, though, if you have a core mission, which in our case, it's to empower our community. So not just our clients, but where we live, where we work, where we play, all those things, our community to live well. And so, each person who is in that community has a different meaning of what live well means. But it really is just enriching the community we live in. And that is our mission. And we are getting our people and our next generation leaders to be in that mindset, give back, add value, and enrich the community in which we live.
My last question for you, Jim, I'm glad you mentioned community because I know it's a big thing for WHZ, as you just alluded to. How did that come about? How did community become such an integral part of the mission? And secondly, how do you leverage that community involvement in your leadership development efforts?
Yeah. Well, I mean, like a lot of small businesses, right? And you're in the community. You're serving the community that you live in. I literally, might go to the grocery store or a restaurant and see any given day clients that I know or other people. That's the community feel we have that's sort of different in Northeastern Connecticut, which is cool. But beyond that, we have an office in Tolland. We're looking in other areas. In those communities too, we're trying to empower that community to live well. The community involvement really stems from our belief that if we're doing well, we want to do well for others. Mm-hmm. And, our involvement locally with things like Teague here in Putnam, IHSP, Access Agency out in Willimantic, we want to help those that are in need for either social services, food, diapers, anybody who's sort of in need on the ecumenical side of things, we'd be wanting to help. Between them and our clients, I think in the past 5 years, we've donated north of $50,000, and we also give time. But in the end, I think that also links back to when we do good, we do good for others. That's what it should be for any company if you can do it.
Yeah, I think it must have good benefits for the culture. And I don't know, Jim, if this is even maybe this is a happy accident, and I looked at it as maybe there was some strategy behind it, but I was looking through the Villager recently.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was on social media, but there was something about the Rotaract Club.
Yeah.
Which my wife and I were in, 15 years ago now. We were in it, like 2010. It was sort of it was resurrected, and it's been going since then. And they had a full table of the Rotaract Club, which I remember when there were, I think at times we had 8 members. We were, and it looked like there were 16, maybe 15, 20 people at the table. But I saw one of your employees, Jillian, there.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, because I had just done an episode of Better Workdays on the work-life alignment,
Yeah.
which is basically, if you're developing leadership skills at work, how can you leverage them so that what the skills you're developing are paying off at work, at home,
Yeah.
and in the community. And when I saw Jillian's photo, I thought, Rotaract Club, first and foremost, it's good. It's doing good in the community.
Yeah.
And I thought, but second of all, and I was curious, I was like, I wonder if that was part of the intent or why Jillian signed up. I was like, but she's going to develop so many good leadership skills. I mean, Rotaract was some of the first opportunities I had to chair events, start running meetings, putting agendas together, keeping a group of people on track. It was so good. So that got me thinking, I wonder if more companies locally could try to leverage these community groups to help their next generation of leaders get some of that experience.
Great point. Yeah, in Jillian's case, we hired her out of UMass. So she left UMass. She was a hospitality major. She is our senior associate for the client experience. So she, with Kate Pitts, has to design our client experience, all the way from face-to-face to online. What does that look like for clients? And Jill said to us in the first year, hey, I'm a young professional. Where could I meet other young professionals? And so to your point, hey, if there's other folks listening in their companies and you have young professionals who have a growth mindset, send them to Rotaract. Send them to the Chamber of Commerce. We've been active in the Chamber of Commerce, Putnam Business Association, Woodstock Business Association, Pomfret Proprietors. These are seats we all sort of sit on. Obviously, the YMCA board, past chair, Lawrence is past chair of that. And we want to give back to, and right now, Liesl was just named the Woodstock Foundation president.
I saw that. Yeah. Good choice.
Yeah.
Good choice by the foundation.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome.
These types of things, as you say, we're doing good. We're getting skills and we don't want to give back to our community. We also meet other professionals that we don't know and we learn from them and we get to know each other. And we used to, when I was the president of the chamber for a year, one of my key pieces of advice to everyone who joined was just, this is your group of commerce here. Share what you're doing, learn from each other, support each other. If you're going to buy something, buy from them. Mm-hmm. If you're not, if you can, right? So it really fosters an idea of a community that is supporting one another. And I know I'm real proud that our company does that locally and beyond, and we're doing the same thing in Tolland and Tolland County.
Yeah, and it's got to help with retention too, because I think even in my own experience, my wife just went from United Services to Pomfret School.
Yep.
And we had a certain point in our lives, you're working in Northeastern Connecticut, you consider moving on or looking for new opportunities, and at a certain point in our life, we just started saying, well, we're going to rule out anything outside of Northeastern Connecticut because the roots are here.
Yeah.
And the kids are here. Before that, it was Rotaract, the ARC, different groups we were involved in. So not that it's necessarily the intent behind encouraging employees to get involved in the community, but I would think a nice, a side benefit of it is that they're the more ingrained they are in the community, kind of the more ingrained they're going to be, hopefully, with your organization too.
Yeah, totally. And I was saying earlier, Gen Z and millennials, they want to be part of something bigger. They want to feel like a part of something. And having community involvement beyond the workplace is a cool way to do it. Mm-hmm. And you can make an impact, you can add value, you can empower your community, you can give your time. And you're part of something that's a little bigger than just our business. And
it means the world when the business supports you in that. Because I've been there trying to do volunteer stuff.
Yeah.
And not to knock the employer, they just, when I worked in Massachusetts and was still living in Northeastern Connecticut, it made it really tough. I was like, I wish I could join Rotary, but lunch is at noon. And,
right.
My employer wouldn't be able to say, yeah, go take the time off and do it. But, so not just to be involved in the community, but to have an organization that is encouraging you to do it, who's going to put a team into your trivia night tournament that you're doing to benefit the hospital or whatever it might be, can make all the difference.
Totally. And I mean, there are so many employers that do that here. And that gets as part of company culture and leadership culture that you want to create, is fostering this idea that we support your growth, we support the team growth, we support the community growth, and all of that. If you can do it, we also offer a few volunteer days per year for every employee to join and volunteer locally.
Oh, that's nice.
So it is a way to sort of keep people involved, and if they have an interest in it, even better, right? So yeah, I know we'll be collecting and helping with the Teague Thanksgiving, at Teague in Thompson, and this past Saturday we collected at the Pomfret Community Center canned goods for the Pomfret Proprietors Group, and they all go to Teague as well. So these sorts of things, giving a few hours to help collect items and helping those in need is just part of building a great company culture that is stemming from our topics today. Leadership, growth mindset, coaching people up to that growth and their potential, and then when they're not performing in a certain way, counseling them out.
And Jim, to close, I wanted to ask, you mentioned these earlier, but for anyone listening who maybe hasn't added the coaching tool to their management belt, I've got the people first coaching model right here. So can you tell people at WHZ that you mentioned it earlier, but just basically the three questions, if you're intimidated by coaching or you want to try it out, it's perhaps easier than you think to get started. And I wanted Jim to share, these are the three questions Jim has trained and developed his people to use to get that coaching ball rolling. And it's not rocket science. Jim, take it away.
We when we started to do this, right, I was like, this has to be really simple, Andy. Like, we have to come up with an approach that was trying to grow someone, but be very simple so that our leaders remember it. So, the first thing we do is what did you do well? So if someone does a presentation, what did you do well? What did you like about what just happened? Right? And then you sort of listen. That's the servant leadership model. Listen, be empathetic, be open, don't interrupt. Right? Depending on how they answer that question, you might ask, well, what could you have done differently or better in your own mind? And this is a good question because you get to see how people thought about themselves. Were they critical? Did they say, no, I did great? So they may not be open to your feedback. So you sort of have to assert yourself there and say, oh, yeah, I think it went really well too. And, this, maybe your eye contact was very good. And however, had you thought about maybe trying to pause at this sentence as you delivered it, right? And you're offering some different feedback and just see what they say. And then you sort of end it with, well, what actions will we take? Obviously, before you get to that actions thing, you want to get alignment with someone. After you ask them what do they think they did well or could have done, after what they did well, what could they have done differently? On the differently side, you want to get alignment on what you might work on. If they want to pause on a certain sentence, or they want to have a different presentation vehicle, or maybe they need to, use a PowerPoint, or, maybe they just need to actually produce a different report. Whatever that is that you're coaching them on, take action on the third step, which is, what are you going to do and by when, right? And so real simple. People first coaching model is what we call it. What did you do well? What could you have done differently or better? And what actions are you going to take to do it differently or better?
Yeah, like you said, simple.
Yeah.
It's like losing weight. It's burn more calories than you take in. It's so simple. Why don't we all do it?
Yeah.
But it's true. So, and that's why with these things, I always try to tell people in workshops, the framework might be simple. Conceptually, it's simple. In practice, that's where the rubber meets the road. That's the difficult part, is really committing to this, because instinctively, especially when things haven't gone well, and this is where the emotional management comes in, instinctively, sometimes we want to take people's heads off or deliver a message, and you really have to be committed to the coaching model of, no, it's a conversation.
That's right.
I'm going to learn from them. They're going to learn from me. We're going to learn from each other and figure out how to get better, how to grow from here.
Right.
but it's that commitment to it. So, if anyone's listening who hasn't adopted coaching in your management style, 3 questions that you can use to get going on it right there.
Yeah. And I think, thinking about that, you're then thinking about how do you get people better, right? And the delivery, to your point, I mean, it takes courage. Not all immediate leaders want to give that sort of feedback every time. So it takes courage and it takes commitment. And having managerial courage to tell people it's not always going well, but to show them how to do it differently. That's really the courageous part.
Well, that'll be if you come back, Jim, which I would like you to. I don't want to be presumptuous, but yeah, courage in management would be a good topic, because sometimes I think the biggest thing in my experience talking to a lot of people who are managers, sometimes the biggest thing holding us back is we're all too nice, and it can kind of take courage to go against that grain,
especially if it becomes a pattern, right? I mean, it's good to be nice and open and those sorts of things, but if it becomes an opportunity to grow someone, or there's a pattern in a certain way to correct a behavior that could be better just by a simple coaching tip, that's our job.
Yeah. You're actually, that can be a little more selfish, where if you're avoiding negative feedback because you are apprehensive about how it's going to feel to give it and how it might be received, you're protecting yourself. You might think you're protecting the other person's feelings, but you're really protecting yourself and maybe robbing them from a valuable growth opportunity.
Very simple potential growth opportunity to say, how do you think it went? What could we do better? And if they don't get to what you think they could do better, you have to tell them. And then you sort of put some action to it. Getting that action step's critical, and then following up in your next one-on-one. Well, how did that go?
Yeah, and pulling it through.
Yeah, that's the accountability piece to the coaching model. Because ultimately, in the end, if you coach someone and you don't put action to it, and there's no accountability to the non-action, then have we really advanced the ball?
All you did was have a conversation.
That's it.
Yeah. All right. Well, Jim, I really appreciate the time.
Yeah,
like
thanks.
I said, I hope you'll be back in the future.
Anytime.
I'd love to get some other members of the WHZ team to come in and talk
great.
to us.
Yeah, we should definitely do that. Thanks, and appreciate you having me on this episode.
Thank you, Jim.
All right, Andy. Thanks.
All right.